Hi there, everybody. So it's been almost 2 years since my official autism and ADHD diagnosis, so I thought today we would go through the paperwork. I'm gonna read you word for word some of the notes from my assessment results because I think there is a ton of stuff in here that absolutely just reads me for filth, right? So I think that's interesting and kind of fun, but also there's some stuff in here that is just so compassionate and kind. And if you are considering getting professionally assessed, I hope that this can bring some peace to your mind with the knowledge that there are caring and knowledgeable assessors out there. Hi there, my name is Megan and welcome to the Neurocuriosity Club, the only YouTube channel that I'm aware of that is specifically made for people who think they might be autistic, they might be ADHD, but they're just not sure. Let's get curious about our brains together. All right, comprehensive mental health assessment summary. First up is psychosocial history, and the presenting problem / reason for seeking assessment says Megan relates a lifelong history of sensory sensitivities that cause distress, difficulties with social relationships, and struggles with language and communication, especially difficulties with identifying and describing internal states / emotions. Now this one I think might surprise some of you because I feel like I get a lot of comments saying like,
oh, you're so articulate, you're so eloquent, you're so well spoken, like you talk about this in such like a clear way.
Usually these videos are very, very, very planned ahead of time. And I spend a lot of time figuring out what I really mean and being really careful with my words. When I'm speaking more off the cuff like this, I struggle with emotion language. I really definitely have alexithymia, which is like difficulty identifying what it is that you're feeling. And so I tend to intellectualize my emotions. So I'm really good with intellectual language, but I really struggle with just saying, I feel blank. And it feels like blank. Like, that's really hard for me. All right, next section is history of presenting problem, reported struggles. Megan reports a sense of disconnect between herself and her body. And this is where I'm directly quoted in this thing. It says, she states, I've thought of myself as a floating head for a long time, which is super true, by the way. I thought everybody felt that way until I started talking to my husband about it. And he's like, no, Megan, that's like not normal. I don't know what that is, but that's not how I feel about my sense of self. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, there's the self, which is this like nebulous thing that sort of floats around. And then there's like this weird meat cage that I need to move myself around. And he's like, no, my body and my sense of self are like intertwined. They're the same. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Some of the other struggles that are in here says she also outlines some auditory differences, explaining that she's had her hearing tested repeatedly, which is true, and that it always comes back very good, but she often isn't able to understand the speech when people are talking to her, particularly when trying to filter speech from surrounding background noise, such as television or in public spaces. She additionally has high acuity hearing and can hear the sound of electronics like the television turning on in the next room. So, that's super true. I have excellent hearing. I've had my hearing tested a million times because I can't hear shit. And every time I get it tested, they're like, your hearing's great. Turns out I have a lot of like auditory processing issues. It's not the problem with the actual mechanisms in my ear, but rather like once it gets to my brain. I don't know if I have auditory processing disorder, which is where my brain literally doesn't process the sounds, or if it's just because of my ADHD, where there's so much happening at once that like I don't know how to focus and really listen to one thing at a time. Let's see, then we start talking about sense of touch. So she finds clothing that is tighter on the center of her body uncomfortable to the point of being distracting, and I'm quoted there saying distracting, as well as generally finding light touch from people and from clothing to be physically painful. And this is so true, it's hilarious. Like, my husband will gently pat me on the back and it hurts, you guys. It literally hurts. And he's always like, I promise I am not trying to hurt you. Like, I don't understand. And I'm like, neither do I, but all I know is the center of my back is so sensitive. It is unreal. Oh, and here my husband is mentioned where it says, for many years, she ate the exact same meal every day until her husband entered her life and encouraged her to at least add a vegetable. She did not identify that she had a picky palate until this time, which is so true. I never thought of myself as a picky eater, probably because growing up, I really wasn't a picky eater because my mom loves to cook and she's an excellent cook. And so she would make these like really delicious home cooked meals and I would always eat them, even if I didn't love like certain things. when someone pours that much time and love and energy into a meal, you don't like not eat it, at least in my household and everything. Like that would have been tremendously disrespectful. And so like, even when there were times I didn't love the meal, there were times I was allowed to be a little pickier. Like if it didn't take a lot of time to make, like we had spaghetti a lot growing up and I hate red sauce. I have always hated red sauce. For my Girl Scout troop, and this is true, I was in Girl Scouts and we got to go to Marco's Pizza and we got to make our own pizza. And I was like, am I allowed to make a pizza without red sauce? Because I truly hate it that much. And they literally had me just put cheese on dough and it was delicious. Like I hate red sauce. I always have. Anyway, so if we were having spaghetti, because that's a really fast and easy meal, I was allowed to heat up some butter and literally have buttered noodles, like autistic stereotype. And the same meal that they're talking about in here was lemon chicken. I would literally dice up some chicken, throw it in a pan, add some lemon pepper seasoning and squeeze a whole lemon on it because I'm a citrus fiend. And then I would make some brown rice in the microwave. And that's literally what I would eat probably 4 or 5 days a week. And then the other days I would make buffalo rice in the crock pot where I would add brown rice, chicken, buffalo sauce, and like garlic powder to a crock pot. And then I would go to class for the day and I'd come back and that would be my dinner. Okay, this part is pretty funny too, moving on from the food. Megan arrived to the assessment with a thick, well-organized binder of personal autism traits, explanations, and assessments. And this is totally true. I made an entire binder with 3 main sections with really cute like cover sheets and everything. So the first section was tests. So these were all free online assessments for autism that I found myself, mostly through embrace-autism.com, which I will put in the description, but some of them came from elsewhere as well. And then the second section was just a spreadsheet full of all of my traits and like their frequency, how I've coped in the past to help identify masking, and then how I cope now. And then the third section was studies. So I printed out studies about autism, read them, highlighted and annotated them, and brought that in as well. And if that sounds super helpful to you, I actually sell a digital version of this binder, both for autism and for ADHD in my shop. So I'll go ahead and link that below. I call them Autism and ADHD Discovery Binders now because I cannot diagnose anything. So I don't want anyone buying these thinking that it's gonna like lead to a diagnosis. It's more just to keep track of your traits and symptoms and to better understand your brain. I like this section. So again, I am quoted. It says, when she is engaged in her interests, she describes it as if she has electricity flowing, like a machine is working, which is so true. Like, I love being like working with my interests. It literally feels so good. It's one of the reasons I am such a workaholic because I love my work. Like filming this right now is a joy. I love talking about this stuff. And so I work a lot, especially when I'm sad or upset, because I don't want to be sad or upset. So instead I engage in my interests, which for me is work. I also thought this was interesting that she noted when she is disturbed from her interests, she feels an intense sense of anxiety due to the fear that she won't be able to return to this physical and mental state, which is super true. I do not like being dragged out of my work. I become very irritable and like not super nice. Just being honest, like I am not a kind person when I am dragged away from my interests. Because I love that feeling so much, and like I'm really afraid when I get disturbed that I won't be able to get back into it because that's a big ADHD thing for me. Ooh, okay, this section is talking about how I feel when I'm out in public. So it says she expresses feeling sweaty, anxious, and nauseated, which is true, when in the grocery store, as well as a sense of cognitive overwhelm due to making comparative decisions, etc. This is so hard for me. Grocery shopping, if I'm gonna go grocery shopping, I like pick up because I can make all the cognitive decisions from like the comfort of my home at least. Or if I'm gonna go to the grocery store, I need like loop earplugs or like my headphones so I can listen to a podcast, or it has to be a quick trip where I know exactly what I'm getting. Grocery stores, man, they're the worst. I also think this is an interesting note. It says she has always preferred spending time with others much younger than herself. So I grew up around my cousins a lot, and I have a lot of cousins. I have 70 first cousins, and I have over 100 cousins if we're counting like my cousins' kids. So there's a lot of us. There were so many of us growing up, in fact, that we had like cliques, like there were enough of us that there were like groups of us, and my clique, my group was always the younger kids. I never really got along with the kids my age. Like they always treated me like I was much younger, or like they didn't get me. Like I have a couple of very specific memories of like, not that I think anyone was doing this on purpose. I just think I was autistic and people didn't know, and they didn't know why I was acting like different. And so it was a little like awkward at times. Whereas with the younger kids, I feel like they didn't question some of my oddities as much. And so it was easier to get along with them. This part is interesting because I actually disagree with this. So we'll see. It says Megan typically describes herself as pretty introverted and prefers to reach out to those she is close to initiate a conversation. She provides an example of this as talking to her sister and calling her mom. She did not mention spending time with or contacting friends, which is so funny to me. Like, I didn't mention my friends at all during my autism assessment. Like, I have friends, I promise, I do, but like, that's hilarious to me. But it's interesting that it says Megan describes herself as introverted, because I am not an introvert. I am extremely extroverted. I'm one of those like odd autistic folks who is very extroverted, and really I gain a lot of energy from being around people, and I get tired when I'm alone. So I know that I'm extroverted, but I think maybe what she was picking up on here is that I'm very socially anxious, and like that can look like introversion at times. All right, that was page number 1. On to page number 2. In this, we're talking about conversation and how I tend to prefer conversation when there is a clear leader, even if the leader has to be me. It says, without this structure, she feels confused as to when it's her turn to speak, even if she has something to say, which is so true, especially on the phone. Holy cow. I am so bad on the phone, you guys. Like truly, it's embarrassing how bad I am on the phone. When I get off the phone, my husband, if I'm on the phone in the same room as my husband, when I get off, he's always like, Megan, you could have asked like a question or two. And I'm like, I'm bad at reciprocal communication. Okay, which is one of the reasons I got diagnosed. All right, the next section in here is relevant childhood and adolescent history, which I thought my assessor did a great job of assessing my like childhood and adolescent symptoms and traits, because the way that I grew up was just, I grew up very Midwestern. Everything is very practical here, and very like lots of emotions are not necessarily seen as normal, healthy, or tolerable. So as a very emotional person, I did a lot of like hiding growing up. Like I just hid the way I felt. And it wasn't like I hid it and like I let myself feel it when I was alone. It's more like I buried it. Like I literally just like killed part of myself in order to like be what I was supposed to be, which, hi, that's masking. No, I know that sounds really negative, and there were negative aspects of the way I grew up for sure, just like literally everybody. But I like that this report says, Megan reports that she had significant support with day-to-day activities and a scheduled routine that was very helpful growing up. When she transitioned to college after leaving home, she reports that her mental health, quote, fell apart. And this is so true, because like, yeah, did I always have the emotional support that I needed? No, not always. But did I have the practical support I needed? Absolutely, 100% every single day. And when I left home, that threw me for a loop. And when I say I had support, I don't mean that like my parents did everything for me. Like I grew up knowing how to do laundry, and I cooked dinner sometimes, not very often. I almost poisoned my family several times. I'm not a good cook. Anyway, but like I would do laundry, and I would do dishes, and I would pick up, and I would sweep, and I would dust and take out trash. So like, it's not that I didn't do those things, but like there was a structure about when they were done and how they were done. And there was always help, because I have several siblings as well. So like I had parents who would do some of it, my siblings would do some of it. So like I grew up in a very collaborative space, which I think was really good for like interdependence. And when I left home and a lot of that started to fall on me alone, it was really overwhelming and really hard. Okay, then this next section is a little bit about feeling misunderstood by peers, because I know I mentioned like feeling kind of misunderstood or not emotionally validated at home and stuff, but like it wasn't just at home, like my peers also didn't get me. So it says, Megan described that she was often misunderstood. She specifically remembers telling her peers something she felt was completely normal in high school, and they, quote, again, I'm quoted, says, looked at me like I was an alien and didn't even respond. This is true. And I feel like this happened pretty pretty regularly, but I have one specific memory that like is just so crystal clear to me. It was like before school. So, you know, you would get to school early. We would all hang out in the cafeteria until we were allowed to go to our lockers, right? That's how it worked at my school. And we were hanging out, the doors open, so we all start heading to our lockers. And I said something to somebody who I talked to on a regular basis. Like this was a friend. And I said something, I don't even remember what, but they literally looked at me like I was speaking in a foreign language and then just like looked away. Like, that is the kind of response I get sometimes when I speak. All right, the next section is family mental health history, which I obviously will not be sharing because that's none of you guys' business. Current significant relationships. Again, not gonna share that right now. Next page, we've got some of the symptoms and problems I reported. Difficulty making friends, difficulty keeping friends, expresses agitation or confusion about the dynamics of social relationships, has been accused of being too blunt, too rude, or too direct, reports feeling drained by social conversation, reports confusion by expressions, jokes, sarcasm used by others, and reports insecurity or fear in social settings. So I specifically remember talking about idioms, right? She was like, so talk to me about idioms. And I was like, well, what do you want to know? And she's like, do they make sense to you? And I'm like, obviously not. Idioms are not meant to make literal sense. Like, you're the apple of my eye. That doesn't make any goddamn sense. But we use it in a shared way that we know the apple of my eye means you're very special to me. You are like, just like me, or, you know, I love you basically. And it doesn't mean anything literally at all, but we know what it means because we all have just decided it means something, just like we've all decided the color red is the color red, you know, even if we all see them differently. I know that's a whole debate, but anyway, like there are just certain things we agree that that's what they mean, and idioms are like that to me. And she looked at me when I said all of this. She was like, uh-huh. So apparently that's a very autistic way to think of idioms, but that's how I think about them. They don't make any sense. They're not meant to make sense. They're just a shared shorthand for something else, basically. So anyway, that's my thoughts on idioms. Then we have education/vocation and like employment, vocational, educational. All of that basically says Megan loves her job, which I do. What are you doing? Oh, me? I'm working on a resource roundup for one of my one-on-one clients. What is a resource roundup? It's a really cool collection of Instagram accounts, academic articles, online tests they can take, podcast episode, YouTube channels, and so many more resources that pertain specifically to what we've talked about in our sessions. That actually sounds really helpful. What do you put in a resource roundup? Well, for this particular client, we are primarily focusing on shame and stories we tell ourselves about who we are and how we can tell stories that are more helpful, more honest, and more compassionate to ourselves. That's kind of awesome. Yeah, but I mean, for some of my clients, we focus a lot more on productivity. For other clients, we focus on emotional dysregulation. And for other clients, we focus on interpersonal relationships. It's super, super customizable when you work with me one-on-one. So what should people do if they're watching right now and they want their own resource roundup? They want to work with you. Oh, they can just go to the description and book a discovery call with me. I love meeting with people before I decide to work with them, just to make sure we're a good fit. Oh yeah, get back to work and we'll get back to the video. Oh yeah, thanks, okay. Then we have leisure, recreational, and interests, current and childhood, where it says, Megan reports that she has had an interest in psychology since early childhood, wanting to be a psychologist. She repeatedly borrowed a peer's book on personality typing. It was the American Girl Doll personality test book, in case anybody had that, and was suggested to just keep it. Upon reflection, Megan realizes that the girl was likely frustrated by the constant borrowing and that the offer to keep the book was not genuine. But at the time, she did not recognize that and did indeed keep the book. Okay, so what happened is I was in 3rd grade and there was this girl whose name I will not share, but if you're watching this and you know it was you, my deepest apologies. I was a very autistic child and did not know. Anyway, she had the American Girl, maybe not American Girl doll, maybe it was just American Girl quiz book. And it was this beautiful purple book. I'll put it on screen if I can find it, right? beautiful purple book, and he would open it up, and it was like a flip book. It opened at the top, and it was just full of personality quizzes. I borrowed this and I marked it with my pencil, and then I would go through and I would erase and I'd give it back to her. And then like 2 or 3 days later, I'd be like, can I borrow it again? And I would literally do the same quizzes over and over and over and like see if I ever got a different result. I was basically doing like science experiments on myself, like trying to see if I was consistent. Like, am I still me, basically? Which, you know, so there was some anxiety brewing in the back of my mind, even in 3rd grade, which is okay. But anyway, I borrowed it so much that she was like,
just keep it.
And looking back, she absolutely didn't want me to keep it. She wanted me to stop asking to borrow it, but that's not what she said. And so that's not what I heard. And so I kept the book. All right, so that's that section. Then we move on to reported behaviors connected to interest, counseling and prior treatment history, page number 4. Behavior observations and mental status. So I find this funny. Posture is stiff. And there's more on that in a minute, but I think part of that's just the way I grew up, okay? Because we have a family of very tall women, and my mom really didn't want us to be like hunched over and like trying to make ourselves small. She was really adamant that like we deserved to take up space and be as tall as we were. And like, I'm not even that tall, but like I would still hunch sometimes, and she would like, you know, encourage me to sit up straight and take up space. So hell yeah, Mom, thank you. Anyway, let's see, body movements, avoidant eye contact, intense eye contact. So here's her notes. She says, alternates intense eye contact when listening, avoidant eye contact when speaking, which is super true, sits unmoving in a very formal, tall position. I do that a lot when I'm in formal situations like assessments. It stresses me out. I sit very tall and very still. Flapped hands when excited and rocked when nervous. So that sounds like me. Something that I thought was interesting is under speech, it says monotone, which I have never been accused of being monotone in my life. I am a very expressive speaker, so I thought that was interesting. Maybe it was like the nerves, but it does say volume does not modulate to match conversation. Yeah, I'm a loud talker, and I can't always tell when I'm supposed to be quieter. So, whoops. And then excessive/long pauses in speech. I do this all the time, and I know that I do this, but it's because I'm being very careful about choosing my words in my head, and it takes me a minute, and so I have to pause, and so I know that I do this. And then it says additional comments, difficulty identifying emotion words, which again is so interesting to me because I am such an eloquent speaker when it comes to talking about my emotions. But perhaps I'm only good at speaking about my emotions in an intellectual way, and she wanted more emotional speech. Like maybe she wanted me to be emotional, and like, I don't know. So I don't know. Next page. So this is all like the results. It's basically outlining the quizzes she had me take and like what they were and all of that. So something that's interesting that I do have highlighted on here is the brief A was completed by both me and my husband. So my husband was filling it out, not for his behavior, but the behavior he noticed in me. So the brief A is a behavior rating inventory of executive function, adult version. It's a standardized rating scale developed to provide a window into everyday behaviors associated with specific domains of executive functions in adult. This is where it is just like very interesting to me that I've never been diagnosed as ADHD, because these scores are through the roof. So the way it's scored is a percentile. So it's basically like how high you scored in comparison to how other people scored. So it's like a bell curve basically. So like, for instance, inhibition, I got 92%, which means I am more inhibited than 92% of the people who took this particular questionnaire. And out of the 10 things that were measured, only 2 of them were under the 90th percentile, meaning that my executive dysfunction is bad. So for inhibition, I'm the 92nd percentile. Shifting, which I believe is going from one thing to the next, which can be an executive dysfunction thing, is the 96th percentile. Emotional control, 98th percentile, meaning I have no emotional control, I'm pretty sure. Self-monitoring is actually one of the only ones that was lower. That's 56%, 56th percentile. So I actually have I think this means like I have good self-monitoring, but maybe it means I have bad self-monitoring. Let's see. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the higher your score, the more you struggle. So self-monitoring was 56th percentile, which means that I actually am okay with that, which makes sense because I'm a deeply self-aware person. Then we have initiation, 98th percentile, working memory, 98th percentile, Planning and organization, 94th percentile. Task monitoring, which I believe is like the awareness of the task you're currently doing and like staying on task, greater than 99th percentile. I'm the top bitch. Nobody is worse at task monitoring than me. And then my total for all of these things across the board was the 96th percentile. So overall, my executive functioning is not great. Okay, then we did the SPM, which I don't know what that stands for, but sensory processing, I don't know, module or something like that. I don't know, but it measures sensory processing difficulties in different areas of sensory input. So for me, I got moderate difficulties on everything except for touch, which was typical, which is interesting because my pain tolerance is so low. So I would have thought that would have been higher, but that's fine. So yeah, vision, hearing, taste and smell, body awareness, balance, planning and ideas, and social participation were all moderate difficulties. The last thing I want to share with you is this really, really beautiful piece at the very end. So there's a couple of pages of like recommendations of things that might be helpful to me, but the end of like my personal assessment, it ends this way. Your autistic traits are more prominent when the demands of the environment exceed your capacity to cope. Throughout your life, you have developed a range of effective compensatory skills. This attenuation did not affect the overall diagnosis, as the clinically significant observed behaviors, reported childhood difficulties, and assessment results show clear consistencies with the clinical diagnosis of autism and ADHD. And you guys, this assessor was so good at her job. She saw straight through the masking, and I did my best to be unmasked, but I know I was still masking somewhat. She saw straight through it, read me for filth, as you can see, and for her to add this at the end to say, like, don't doubt this. I'm not like giving you this diagnosis because you said one or two things. We have the observed behaviors, reported childhood difficulties, and assessment results are consistent with each other. And that was so helpful. And something else that this assessor did during my results appointment when we went over all of this together, she actually showed me in the tests that I took, like the assessments, there are validity measures, which basically means there are certain questions they ask to like sort of suss out if people are maybe exaggerating a little, or maybe there's something totally different going on. And so they throw those in, and she showed me the validity measures, and she's like, you got a low enough score to show that you are definitely not exaggerating, that these answers are your legitimate answers. And I was like, thank you. So this concludes the chatty assessment result video. If you want to hear more about how I went through the process of getting diagnosed, go ahead and check out this video. And I'll see you all next time.